Hey everybody, welcome back to this series where I flip through various RPG products that I have and give them a quick review. In this video I thought I would do 3 D6 systems. We're all really familiar with the D20 idea, right? You roll a D20 and you try to hit a target number or roll under it, whatever it might be, but there are other mechanics out there for conflict resolution, for solving the issues you come across in a TTRPG. And the D6 is probably the second most common that I know of after the D20. Back in the day, I started with Hero Quest, which is essentially a D6 system. It's basically 40k, right? Warhammer 40k, or Warhammer Fantasy. And Hero Quest developed out of that. And there are some D6 systems around today. They're not as common, certainly, as the D20, but there are others that are kind of building up and developing systems that use cards, systems that use D12s. But I like the D6. I have an affection for it because of Hero Quest, and so here are some. I have 3 here that I'm going to be going through today, and it's going to be increasing order of difficulty in terms of how complex the D6 system is. The first of these is Phi, I Say, which is a D6 comedy fantasy parody role-playing game. It's essentially, on the back cover, it's described and throughout, it's described as the result of a Mel Brooks-style Lord of the Rings game, or something like that. What if Mel Brooks had directed Lord of the Rings? Essentially, you know, the guy who put together Blazing Saddles and Robin Hood Men in Tights and Spaceballs. That tone, really silly, really over the top, really ridiculous. But the mechanics themselves actually aren't that funny. There is the art and the tone of the book is presented in sort of a comedic way, and the built-in adventure is sort of presented in a comedic way. The actual mechanics themselves don't have anything that makes them comedy or parody. So I'm not really sure how accurate the description of the system is, because it's really just tone and flavor to a system that's actually pretty solid, although very simple. So I'm going to go through it and just give you guys a sense of what it's like. So again, as you'll see throughout, it's Tim Snyder is the writer, and the artwork's done by various artists, Bruno Junges, I'm not even going to try, Aaron Siddle, and J.V. West. And the art is all very much in that old comic booky, silly style. Some of those, those old comic books that you saw in the old player's handbooks back in the day of older editions of D&D, a lot of the art looks like that. Has a definition of Phi early on, and then that's a more, contemporary piece of art, a more normal piece of art. The table of contents, this whole book is 65 pages, so it's pretty short. Really ridiculous art there. And then the introduction and what you need to play. D6 system, you need pencils, you need paper, and that's it. And one of the dice you need is the Phi die. And this is one of the things that makes it kind of interesting and makes it slightly different than other systems. So I'll talk about the Phi die in a minute. But you have 4 attributes: strength, dex, intelligence, and charisma, essentially. Stout-hearted, deft, flexibility, inventive, and charming. And you have attributes a value between 2 and 5 in each of those. You start with 12 points and you add them. You can add them in any combination. Just create your guide. And then for each of those, you create a skill. And the skills can be whatever you can think of. But basically, the attribute number is the number of D6s you roll when you're trying to test that skill, or when you're trying to test that ability. And if you're doing something in the realm of the skill that you've invented, and it can be anything as long as the DM is okay with it, as long as it's reasonable, you get an extra 3 dice. So if you're trying to, force a door open, and you have a strength skill of 3, you roll 3d6. But if you happen to have the skill, break objects, or, punch hard, or something like that, trample, and you say, well, I give the door a running, a running charge. Can I use my skill there? The DM would say, sure. So then instead of 3, you get 6. That sort of thing. It's very simple. Now the target number that you're trying to roll is just like D&D, an actual target number, so it's between 5 and 20 or something like that. And so instead of rolling 1d20, you have this curve of d6s. So 3d6, you're on average going to get 10, about 10 and a half with 3d6. So that means if you have, with a score of 2 to 5, that's going to be about an average test, right? A DC 10 is going to be an average test for most people. So if you're slightly weaker at the thing, you only have 2 abilities, it's going to be harder to get that. But if you have 3 or more, then that's going to be pretty easy on average to do, maybe even very easy to do if you have 5 in that, or if it's in the area of your skill. So really simple system, and that D6 curve works pretty well. Magic, he talks about, he says we'll get to that later, but basically magic is just skills. it's the same thing. You just pick a skill, but you just make it a spell, and that's it. And it's done the same way that skills are. So you have strength spells or intelligence spells, and you just say, this is what this spell does, this skill, quote unquote spell, and then you roll 3 extra plus your ability when you're trying to cast that spell. That's all it is. Health points, hit points. Hit points equal to your strength score. You have your AC, which is your equal to your dex score. You get a name and a class, and then you get experience points. And these are kind of cool. I like the way he does experience points. You get experience points for completing an adventure, for accomplishing goals, and you pick one of 4 goals to be pursuing. And then by doing something awesome or hilarious at the table, you get XP for that. And then you can use XP in 3 ways. You can use XP to add extra dice to a roll, 1 XP per extra dice. You spend your resources. Your XP is a resource. Or you can subtract XP from a hit to reduce damage, 1 XP per damage shrugged off. Or at any time you can spend 10 to increase an attribute point by 1, and that increases the skill by 1. So you can save up your XP to level yourself up, or you can spend it to keep yourself alive or to do extra stuff in combat, which is kind of cool. It keeps this like, well, what should I do with this? Should I save it or not? So you have what is best in life, which is for glory, for good, for gold, and for God. And basically when you make a character, you pick one of these, and that's how you get extra XP when you're doing something like that. When you do something that fits with that, the DM can give you extra XP. Then you get equipment, and it's pretty standard, 2 personal items and up to 4 items that are common fantasy items. And what they do is up to you. And then magic spells or skills, and that's it. And he gives an example of how that works. Here's some example possible spells, and what does it do? Basically, it's up to you and the DM. And then there are some ways to decide how you guys all came together, right? There's we got to go get out of this town. We went to high school together, members of the court, and swept into the realms from elsewhere. Or you all meet in a tavern. Here's a character sheet. Very simple, very basic. The only thing on here that hasn't really been explained, I guess, is the L next to what fisticuffs is, and that's just, it means light damage. Almost all of your stuff is going to be light damage, unless there's a reason it's not. That just does 1 damage. Then there's medium or heavy damage. It's just 2 damage for medium or heavy damage for 3. And everything is done in terms of light, medium, or heavy damage, in terms of monsters and things like that. Very straightforward. Resolving actions, the DC. The DM just decides on what it should be. And here are some easy, average, hard, or impossible. And then one of the things that can happen is you can help each other out. You get extra dice if you help each other out. You have competition, which is just who rolls higher. And then the phi die, and this is what's interesting. The phi die is a special die you add in, and it's a different color, has a marked up face, basically. And when you roll a 6 on the phi die, you roll it every time you do a test. You roll the phi die as well. And if it rolls the phi die, then there's a complication that occurs. If a different number comes up, then no problem. But if it's that 6, or if it's whatever you've marked up, then something happens, a complication. So you could succeed with the complication, or you can fail with a complication, because it doesn't actually matter for the success or failure, because it's not counted towards the success or failure, except it just has this 1 result. So 1 in 6 chance of having a complication anytime you do anything. And that's cool. It adds another element to it. And then anytime you roll a 6, you can roll again with that die. So sixes explode, and they continue to explode until you succeed. So you can get a lot of really high rolls if you get lucky. Talking with your fists, which is combat, it's pretty straightforward. You just roll according to your strength. If you have swordplay, you can add on to it. And the enemies have armor class, or basically they have their own defense dice that they roll. And then the same thing when monsters attack you, they roll, and you have to roll your armor class. And again, if you roll higher than them, then you don't take damage. If you roll lower than them, then you take a damage. And sometimes it can be more than 1 damage or multiple damage. And then there are some distances that can make, if you're doing ranged attack. And it's all very straightforward. Light damage is 1 hit point of damage, medium damage is 2, heavy damage is 3. And one of the things they say is characters don't die. Basically, no one dies in this game. This is part of how they make it a humorous game. You could ignore this rule if you wanted to. It'd be easy enough to take out. But basically, when you're reduced to 0 hit points, you're just out for the scene, or for 5 minutes in real time, in which case you come back with 1 hit point. And similarly, when monsters and NPCs go down to 0, they're not dead. They either surrender or fall unconscious or run away screaming, or tell the NPCs everything, or they have a change of heart, or whatever it might be. The idea is they're out of combat, but the game is trying to be, not serious or deadly, or anything, not serious or deadly or anything like that. How you heal. And then this is for the DM, basically casts of NPCs and their stats, monsters, and how they work. They have a power skill, which is everything. It's all the dice that they roll for their skills and for their attacks and for their armor and everything. Power skill. It just simplifies. Very simple stats. And then you have the obligatory introductory adventure, which I won't go through in any detail, but it's silly. It's what you might expect. There are exploding ducks. There are shrieking weasels. Villains flying around on dragons. It's classic, silly fantasy adventure. So Phi I say, and then at the very end there is an appendix I, or appendix exclamation point. I think it's an I, or upside down I. And then author's final word, which is where it came from, and then extra character sheets at the end with some art there at the back of the book. So Phi I say, D6 system, very straightforward, very simple, but I think kind of interesting. An interesting little D6 system. And again, the funniness, the humor comes from the writing rather than from the mechanics. So you could use this system in your own games if you don't want to do kind of a parody game, if you wanted a simple D6 system, because it's really straightforward, really simple, and I think quite good, honestly. This was Kickstarted this year, so it's available. You guys can purchase it. I'll put links below, of course. Now, the second game I wanted to cover is Easy D6. This is much more, I think, well-known than Phi I say. It's out there. It's another D6 system, but it's very simple in its basic mechanic. But there are lots of optional rules that are kind of added on top that make it, I think, more complex than Phi I say. It's a Runehammer Games. It's by DM Scotty. He has you can check out his channel. And layout and rat catching by Brandish Gilhelm over at Runehammer Games. And I think, it says the art's by Sean Bova. The art's all very, very one style, so it's unified in that way. Fast-moving game of fantasy mayhem, and that's one of the things I really appreciate this game, is that it's very, very fast. You can make characters quickly, and then you can get into it, and the mechanics there's nothing really bogs you down. But there are lots of extra rules that are kind of added on to make your characters more interesting, and it gets a bit more complex than Phi I say, which is very simple. This book is about 110 pages, and then there's a second book you can get, which is a whole bunch of adventures and quests and stuff like that. But this has the basic stuff that you need. So why Easy D6? Why make this game? And I think it's cool. This day and age, there are so many systems out there. It's nice to have a bit of like, why do we want this one as opposed to the other? The DM's called the Rabble Rouser, or the RR. Other players are pushers and shovers, the protagonists of the story. All right, here's the simple rule. You roll a D6, and you try to roll higher than the DC. And the DC is 2 through 6. 1 is always a failure. That's it. That's the basic game. You roll a D6. So instead of a D20, you roll a D6. Easy tasks, you roll 2 or higher. Normal tasks, 3 or higher. Hard tasks, 4 or higher. Very hard, 5. Super hard, 6. And that's it. For most combat situations, you need to roll 3 or higher, and the enemies need to roll 3 or higher to hit you. You roll one die, I should say. Sometimes you get more dice, but most of the time, that's it. Simple, basic mechanic. He's like, well, what about differences of characters? And there are ways to make your characters different. One of the ways is boon. Boon and bane is basically advantage or disadvantage. In a boon, you roll twice, you roll 2 dice, and you take the higher. And with a bane, you roll 2 dice and take the lower. But you can get multiple boon and bane dice. You could have 3 boons as a result of equipment and training and help. And so you'd roll 4 times, right? 1 plus the 3 boons. And you might have some banes that are canceling those things out. And so maybe one of those banes takes away because you roll 1 fewer. So you're balancing out boons and banes and trying to get that target number. 1 is always a failure, and 6s are always successes. And in combat, they do an additional thing. They get you critical success. And then everybody gets a hero die, which is just once a session. You get a hero die, and you can burn it anytime to reroll a die, even a 1. You can't get it back unless you use karma. Karma is sort of a way of gathering resources. Karma is a way of making it feel less bad if you fail. So you get 3 karma at the beginning of every session, and then whenever you fail an action, you get a karma. You can spend a karma to increase your roll by 1 pip per karma spent. You can never spend it on a crit fail. You can never spend it on a 1. Hero die can be used on that. So you could spend 5 karma to get a hero die and then use it on a crit fail. But you can increase it to a 6. In combat, that becomes a critical success. And if you fail it, you can't use that particular karma to make this. If you rolled a 3 and you needed a 4, for example, and you fail, you get a karma, you can't use it right then to make it a 4. There are two kinds of time: narrative time and action time. Brief descriptions of what that means by it. And action time is, really, really fast, and narrative time is more slow and things are going on. How far can you move? Who goes first? You have 3 strikes and you're out. That's it. So instead of having lots of hit points, you just have 3 strikes. You can recover lost strikes with magical healing or with rest. If you ever get 3 strikes, you're out. You're gone. 1 strike is 1 point of damage. 1 hit is a strike of damage. So enemies have multiple strikes. Usually they don't have 3. They might have more or less that they can take. But you as a player always have 3. And then crits. So if you roll a 6, you explode. You can keep rolling. And every 6 that you roll, you keep exploding. Remember, you can use karma to increase your hit to a 6. If you roll a 5, you can spend a karma to make it a crit and roll again. And if you roll another 5, you can spend another karma to make it another 6. And then roll again. So you can, use that karma to maximize your attacks and make them really strong. And if you do ranged attacks, you can multiply, shoot multiple targets. If you're melee, you can attack people who are nearby. So if you kill somebody with the first strike and you get a crit on him, then you can carry that over to somebody else, and it can keep going. Then there are opposed rolls. You just roll 2d6. Whoever rolls higher succeeds, and if it's tied, you keep fighting next turn, keep testing next turn. Armor is you roll to reduce strikes to 0. Everybody has armor saves, and then there are miracle saves. So if your armor wouldn't only save you from it, you have a miracle save, which is all of your other saving throws basically put together. And certain classes have better armor saves, certain classes have better miracle saves. Magic is slightly different. Magic has, he says, a sort of different feel, and therefore it's more of a mini game. Money is simplified. You don't have particular coins, you just have wealth levels. So if you're wealthy, for example, you can easily afford transport like horses and wagons, as well as permanent accommodations, and retain a small staff, as well as most gear, armor, weapons, rented accommodations, food and simple clothing, etc. So you have a wealth level that you get as a result of adventuring. You can get it and lose it depending on circumstances. And how to play: you choose a hero path, you choose a species, inclinations, aspects, and then if you're a conjurer, which is a wizard, you get a circle of sorcery, and then you get equipment. Very simple. Here are the classes. Warrior, you have health, 3 strikes, and everybody, as far as I know, so the brute has 5 strikes of health. So not everybody has 3 strikes and you're out. It's a certain number of strikes and you're out, but some classes have more health. So you have health, strikes, armor. So he has heavy armor, which means he saves against wounds on a 3+ with a shield or 4+ without, and he has a miraculous save of 6. And then he has boons on melee and strength tasks, so he gets an extra die to use when he's trying to do a melee or strength task. He has a shield sacrifice, a brutal strikes ability, and dual weapons ability. Simple. This is the entire warden class right there. 3 strikes, medium armor, with a miraculous save of 5, or save against wounds is 5, and miraculous save is 6, and ranged weapons and wilderness tasks. He's got Trailfinder and Forager. You have the Delver, you have the Brute, you have the Rascal, the Conjurer, the Friar, the Scald, the Beastmaster. And then you have species: human, elf, dwarf, halfling, and goblin. Each of them get some bonuses. All of them get 2 inclinations, but humans get a 3rd. That's their abilities. They get more inclinations. And the inclinations are things like this. Born Blessed, you start each session with 6 karma instead of 3. Or a checkmate: you can intercept foes before they reach a target near to you, and they cannot move away the next round without being punished. If they try to retreat or move away, you get a free attack, and if you hit them, they cannot move away. It's a free action. So you pick 2 of these. For most species, humans get to pick a 3rd. So your characters, despite being such a simple system, your characters are quite different. They're going to be quite unique, which I think is cool. Creating aspects. So aspects are essentially like a description of your hero, right? So a champion gladiator, a light sleeper, devastatingly handsome, whatever you want to say. It's a way to play your character. And when you're playing towards that aspect, you get boons. Then there are circles of sorcery. So if you're a conjurer, you get particular kinds of schools of magic, you might say, and ways of describing them and what they do. There is the arcane bands: blast master, the botanicalist, the elementalist, the illusionist, the necromancer, the seer, the shadow weaver, and the shapeshifter. Then you get armor, and armor is based on class. You can try to wear heavier stuff, but then you get a better armor save, but you get bane dice to do anything basically. And then you get random gear, or you can pick basically. How much you can carry is just based on how reasonable things are. And then rabble rousing, which is the stuff for the DM. So players, turn back now. What makes a good game? This is advice on how to play, what you need to play, playing with miniatures and terrain. Pro tips: how do you convince people to want to play this game? Long-term hero rewards: how to make the game more meaningful long-term. Action numbers, target numbers, arbitrating spells. Miracles should be hard, falling is dangerous, not all enemies are created equal. judgment over rules. Again, a lot of advice. I'm not usually as keen on advice, but this is definitely intended to be like somebody's first RPG, or at least like a very simple RPG, and so a lot of this advice, I guess, makes sense, but I don't know how many people are going to find this book first and not know what an RPG is or not know a lot of this stuff offhand. But, insofar as it goes, it's good advice. Monsters. You get a whole list of classic monsters, different kinds of monsters and what they do, how many strikes, how hard they are to hit. The Dragon Great Worm is a 5 to hit, really hard, and takes 25 strikes. Really deadly. And he's doing 4 attacks. Each inflicts 2 strikes. They can fly. Magical ability with 5d6. So he's got magic. He rolls 5d6 to resist magic. He's immune to fire attacks. He's got 2 boons in strength, melee, and lore. He's got Fire Breath, which is if you take a wound, you're set on fire. And he's got dragons. That's it. Lots and lots of cool monsters. Magic treasures. Scrolls. Potions. Melee weapons. Armor. Lots and lots of stuff. Then handy bits, which is just rules references. Lots and lots of rules references. Location creators, minions, and how to use them. Probability generators, which is kind of cool. And then a character sheet. Lots of character sheets, and then a thank you page. So another great system, more complex, of course, than Phi, I say, but most of that has to do with the stuff that's added on top of it rather than the system itself. The system itself is really straightforward and really easy. I really like Easy D6, and I'd like to play it. I probably would use it for more like one-shots or pickup games rather than a long-term campaign. But it's a really cool, simple system. You have a D6, you can basically run it right there. That's all you need is a single D6, maybe a couple, and you're all set to play the game. Now, the third of these is much more complicated. The third book I'm going to be looking at here is Torchbearer, which is sort of a spin-off of Burning Wheel. This is a tough game. The basic mechanic isn't too difficult, but I think there's a lot about it that is quite hard. So this book also has like 4 books that you kind of need, or maybe 3 books to run this. And if you don't have them available, you're kind of going to be at a loss because you have to kind of go back and forth between them. And they're all big books. This book is 250 pages. Now, about 100 pages of that is actually just the rules and the characters set up and all that. So, but the rest of it is stuff you need to know. And you kind of have to jump back and forth between this book and the DM's Guide to understand the game fully. And the DM's Guide isn't properly named either. It's kind of like a couple books that you do need. Now, it says early on, where is it? I don't know. Let's see if I can find it. There is a, yeah, here it is. Keys to the Kingdom. There are 5 books, and the ones that you kind of need are the Scholar's Guide and the Dungeoneer's Handbook, which is this one right here. I'm not going to go through the Scholar's Guide, but in order to understand the game fully, you kind of have to have those 2 and go back and forth between them. So keep in mind, this is just going to be a limited review of one side of it and the basic mechanics and the characters rather than the whole background, because you have the Scholar's Guide, which is rules for the background for the DM, essentially. And then there is the Lore Master's Manual, which is a bunch of optional rules. And then there's the Cartographer's Companion, which is the actual adventures. And then there's the Mittermark Campaign book, the setting book. Now, I got the box set of this, and I decided not to do a flip through of it here. But it comes with a lot of extra stuff. It's actually really cool, and just as like a item on the shelf, it's awesome. It's a really beautiful book design, really cool peripherals that come with this, and the books themselves are solid, good hardback books, great and lovely. Am I ever going to use this game? I don't think so, because it's so complex to learn. I don't think I would have fun going through the process of learning it. Now, some people are going to see this game and go, yes, I need it. I have to play it. I'm going to love it. Power to them. This is going to be awesome for those tables. It's not for me. It's not for me and for my 2 players. So the way that the game works is it's a D6 system, and you're trying to roll a certain number of successes, and successes is defined as 4, 5s, or 6s. Failures are 1, 2s, and 3s. So you have a certain number of dice that you roll as a result of your attributes, as a result of your skills, and you're trying to get a success, a certain number of successes. So in this way, it's much more like something like, Hero Quest or Warhammer 40K or something like that, where you're trying to roll above a certain number. In this case, it's the set number of 4, 5, or 6. And just get a certain number of them. So you might roll 8 dice, and you're trying to get as many 4, 5s, and 6s as you can on those dice. Now, this game is just chock full of advice but it's advice about how to play RPGs. And I think that most of this stuff is just stuff I already know. I don't think a lot of people are going to pick up Torchbearer and have no idea, like, how to play this idea, to listen, to explore, to decide, to describe, to live. Or at least if you don't know that stuff, like, maybe a brief description of it is better than a lot of information, because there's just so much information in this book. Dice and terms. Now here's what I mean. You get successes on 4s, 5s, and 6s, axes and suns on the custom set of dice that it comes with, or worms, which are 1s, 2s, and 3s. Worms are the failure. So you can use the custom dice, you can use your own dice. Obstacles, that's what you need to roll. It's usually 1 through 10. So an obstacle 6 test means you need 6 successes to pass it. You get plus dice and minus dice, means you get to add those dice to the test or subtract them to the test. And then plus and minus successes, which is really interesting. You only add pluses to your success if you succeed, but it can never turn a fail into a success. And you only subtract, you subtract regardless of if you succeed or fail. And so you, minus 2s, for example, indicates that after you roll, subtract 2 successes, and then determine if you passed or failed the roll. So in other words, minus dice can turn a success into a failure, but you can never get positive dice that turns your failures into a success. It just makes you succeed by more. Or tied rolls. So if you tie it, then you add more successes. So basically, if you have bonuses, it means that you can succeed better. And that's a mechanic, because sometimes you're not just trying to get it, you're trying to look at the margin of success. You're trying to see, I want to succeed by, I'm supposed to get 3 at a minimum, but I'd like to get as many as I can, because that margin of success can give you benefits. So plus dice in that sense help. And the same thing with margin of failure. The more you succeed by, the worse certain things can get. You choose a class. You note your human upbringing. If you're a human, not every class is. And the class and stocks, which is what they call the races or the species, go together. So you can't be a human burglar, you're a halfling burglar. You can't be a halfling fighter, you can only be a halfling burglar. As far as I can tell in these rules, that's basically what you are. You pick class and stock together. It's just one package. And then you get your hometown, your social graces, your specialty, your wises, and you have to answer some questions about your nature, your background, and that determines your character sheet. You get certain abilities and skills. You answer circles, which are sort of your social skills. And then you get resources, gear, weapons, armor, and then relics or spells if you're a caster, or if you're if you're a caster, either a mage or a priest. And here are the classes. You can be a halfling burglar, a human magician, a dwarven outcast, an elven ranger, a human theurge, and a human warrior. Those are the classes you can be. And then you get your class, you get certain traits at level 1, and then it goes through a breakdown. Burglars are halflings, right? You're always a halfling burglar. Magicians, outcasts, rangers, theurges, and warriors. You can optimize your character, talks about which is a valid strategy, how you should approach it. And if you're playing a human stock character, you choose one of the following skills and give it a rating of 3. If you already possess the skill from whatever you might have had because of your optimization characteristic, you can make it a 4. You choose your home, and that gives you a skill from your character from the settlements list, and it gives it a rating of 2. So if you're an elf, you came from elf home, then you have these healer, mentor, and pathfinder skills, and you get the traits calm and quiet. But you could also be an elf from the dwarven halls, and then in that case you get armor, laborer, stonemason, cunning, and fire. The elf home is reserved for elves, but everything else anyone can pick, as far as I can tell. This is one of those ones where I have to say, as far as I can tell, quite a lot, because I'm not certain about this game. You get wises, which are basically ways of helping out in certain areas. You're like, Chronicles wise, or Appraisal wise, or Folly of Humanity wise, right? Or something like that. And it's like, it gives you a way of helping out other people, knowledge and specialty in certain areas. One of my problems with this game, and this is the reason I'm not going to do it, is that there are so many specific terms that all sound very similar. So the difference between traits and abilities and skills and values and circles and wises and like all of these different things that have specific names and definitions. And until you know them, they're not easy to distinguish. Once you know them, obviously you can get into it. But traits and base nature and pushing nature and channeling your nature are all different things. And you kind of have to know all that. And when you're making your character, You have to know, okay, well, in this case, I set this to 2, but I only set it to 2 if that's also set to 1, and then this time, I only get this if I don't have that. And it's like, it's hard, it's complicated, it's not easy. The character sheet at the end does help. I mean, like, if you actually look at a character sheet, it does make it pretty clear what you're going to look like and what you're going to get. Essentially, you have your base abilities, and then a bunch of skills that are built on top of them. And if you use your base abilities, then you can have beginner's luck in the skills that you aren't trained in. And you have to kind of use beginner's luck to get better at something. One of the things I really like about this game is that in order to level up an ability, you have to both succeed and fail a certain number of times. It's not sufficient to just get experience points. You have to actually use the skill in the game and succeed at it a certain number of times and fail at it a certain number of times. That's kind of cool. Here's all the equipment. You can start with spell books. So here we are. After you've made your character, you can set the stage by introducing yourself and talking to the leader. And then you need, you're still not done yet, right? Because now you need your beliefs, your creeds, your goals, and your instincts. And those each matter. Your goals do change how you have to play and what you ought to do and what you can try to do and things like that. All right. And then there's an essential guide. So what is belief and how to play it? What it can do, challenging beliefs, how creed and what it is, how you should play it. Lots of advice about this specific system and how it plays into playing a particular character, which is cool because it's building on this particular system. Your instincts and how to trigger them and what is a good instinct and what's a bad instinct in terms of writing it onto your character sheet. So you could pick your instincts should be always or if-then statements. Always map our progress when we camp. That's your instinct. It's the DM. It's up to the DM to create situations that trigger the instinct and make it a challenge and why you should do it or not, right? Okay, then you get the different abilities, will, health, resources, circles, nature, might. Might is your inner power, but nature is your inner strengths, right? So might is a measure of your heroic stature, whereas nature represents your stock's inner strength. Things like that. I mean, like, okay, they're different, and I see that they're different, and especially once you started to use them, that would probably become easily. But just looking at them, it doesn't make it easily clear what's what. So this book takes research, there's study. You got to like read through it. It's like a textbook. You got to study and do homework in order to play this game. Then there are skills, and those build on top of your abilities. And sometimes you can use your nature, and sometimes you can use your skills, and sometimes you can't. In certain circumstances, if you're depleted in certain ways, you can't do certain things. You have persona points, fate points. Oh, goodness. This game is very complex. And how your traits and how they can, the different levels of those traits. And then your inventory, and that can add dice. All this stuff can add dice in to your successes and failures. And you can lose equipment, and then suddenly what do? Like you lose your water skin. It matters. But there are rules for what happens when you can't get your water. Arcanum and how spells work. Lots of spells, scribing spells, materials and focuses, helping with spells. The exception. There's always exceptions. Scribing scrolls, spells in conflict, learning new spells, example arcane spell. It's very, very complex. Now, I might be just dumb. I'm sure that there are people out here, lots of people out here, who play this game and love it and find it easy. You might be listening to this and just being like, man, he doesn't know what he's talking about. That might be true. But for me, this is a little too complex for me, a little too complex for me to easily find this fun. And I think that part of it is the book and the writing. Like, I think this information could be presented in a better way, because it's just boom, and you're not given like a brief recognition that this stuff is complex. It's just kind of given to you and layered on and layered on and layered on really rapidly. In just a matter of 100 pages, you have a lot of concepts to keep straight. How leveling up works and how you level up particular benefits and you pick them. I don't know. I just think it could use a bit more clarity in its presentation. But I understand that the system itself is complex, and so maybe that is just, that's just built in. It's going to be complex, and its presentation is as good as it could be. But I don't know. You have pre-made characters as examples. There's one of each of the main stocks, or one of each of the main classes. And then you get a reference section in the back. The reference section is like 100 pages with gear descriptions. and skill lists and what the skills do and how they work, and like cooking skill, the beginner's luck. It's a will beginner's luck skill. You can help it if you have alchemist or laborer, and it can maybe help those things. I'm not sure. What the supplies are needed to use it, and then the ingredients and how many successes you need in order to, how many they add to your skills, I think is what that is. Or maybe know how many successes you need to make it to succeed. So if you're making a large group and your materials are moldering sacks of grain or other rotten fruit, it's at 6. You need a 6 to succeed because you need 2 from the large group and 4 successes from that. And if you want to preserve, there are certain things you need to do. So that's, all of these have particular details, and it's lots of skills and then traits, and the traits you get, lots of those, spells and circle spells, and going through all the different circle spells, lots and lots of them, and what they do and how they manifest, and complications for casting them. Just the basic mechanics for casting them. And then invocations, which are the theurge spells, so religious spells as far as I think I can tell. Going through invocations, and then other weapons, because not all conflicts are martial and not all weapons are made of steel and wood. So things like nets or traps, lures, camouflage, but also evidence, finery, intimidation, playing to mood, the right tools, riddles, distractions, convince weapons, pursue weapons, riddle weapons, trick weapons, and then an index of headings throughout the whole book, which is useful to help you figure out where things are. Keep in mind, this is one book, and then here's the adventure phase procedures at the very end, and the flowchart for them, which make more sense on the actual page because you have both pages together on all the procedures that you need. So keep in mind, this is one book of 4, aside from the setting book, in order to learn all the rules. So this is a very complicated game. This is the player's handbook, essentially. This is to get the players in to learn how to play the game. Now, again, I don't think that this game is impossible to learn. Obviously not. It's not impossible. It might not even be all that difficult after you sit down and actually do it. But it's not easy to read through. And for someone who isn't familiar with this game, it's a wall. It's hard to get over. So, do I recommend it? I think for certain tables, absolutely. The art is great. Some of the ideas are really cool. The world that it presents is really fun and interesting. Do I recommend it for everybody? No, I don't think so. Torchbearer isn't for everybody. It's not even really for me. I mean, I collected it because I like collecting things. I really do like having the actual box set. It's cool because it comes with the dice and the tokens and things like that. But I would recommend something like Easy D6 or Phi I Say in terms of ease of use and practicality at the table. Like, I don't really have time to do a whole bunch of homework to learn a system. And I think you would really take hours to learn Torchbearer. But there are people out there who just love it. I know that. And I don't want to take anything away from the fun that they have at their tables, because obviously they do. So if you're one of those people who really likes the amount of crunch to Torchbearer and the amount of, just really, I'm sure, well thought out skill tables and spell tables and how it all works together, and it just clicks for you, then awesome. Go for it. I tend to prefer things that are a bit lighter, which is why I go for Shadow Dark or something like Easy D6 over something like that. But anyway, I hope this has been interesting. All 3 of these are really well-produced products, even if, like Phi I Say is pretty simple. Torchbearer is really complicated. A lot more effort went into Torchbearer, let me tell you that, to put it together. But I'll put links below to where you can get any of them, if any of these fit your tastes. Anyway, hope this has been interesting, and I'll see you guys around.